Hey guys, and welcome back to DragonBorn Industries.
We actually joked about that moments before we start the stream.
Yeah, that's a good start to a first episode of what we hope to be a long-running series on this channel where we talk about 40k. Yeah. So I'm Ian, the DragonBorn Bard, as always, but this is my friend Alex.
Hello.
And Alex is what I would call a neckbeard.
Yeah.
No, so Alex is a friend of mine who is into 40k. I was happy to say that you're into 40k.
Yeah.
And I have some minis, and I have I bought a combat patrol for the Tau Empire a while back because I wanted to just paint some Tau Empire. And what I'll do is, so there you go. There's one of my minis right there. That's not fully finished yet, but I only really know about the minis themselves and painting them. I don't actually know about the lore. I don't know how to play the game. I just quite literally have minis that I wanted to paint. And whereas Alex here, you've, I think, read the Heresy series?
Pretty much, yeah. I think I'm one book away from completing the Heresy series, which is, I won't get into too much detail, but that's, I've forgotten the words already. The End and the Death, Part 2, is the next book, and it's going to be the final one in the Horus Heresy. And that's where I'm up to, really.
And yeah, so I think that hopefully Alex will be able to give us the lowdown on kind of what 40k is, which is going to be an overview for what this episode title is going to be. And also, as we progress forward, hopefully with the series, we'll start the streams without a mute on, and we'll learn about like the different factions. We'll learn about like who, especially the Emperor of Man is, because I think that's really important to the entire thing.
That's important to know.
And although I know a little bit, thanks to Alex, whenever he gets chatting about it, and whenever you kind of like, you know,
I get carried away quite a bit.
And that's what we want, because I certainly want to learn about the lore, but I'm not going to read
through.
But
I could be full of shit, I don't know.
What is it they say? That it's everything's canon until it's not?
Yeah. There's no such thing as, I'm getting too much into it now, but there's no such thing as retcon in 40k because that's how they do it.
It's just perspective, isn't it? So
yeah, pretty much.
I think when you read a book, from what I was reading about on internet rather than actually reading the books, is you're sort of reading it from the perspective of the characters that it's following rather than as an overview of the entire story.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they mean. So they can go in and change things for different editions and like new characters and stuff, and that's why you get changes throughout the editions.
They're quite clever about it because they sort of say, well, that's the theme, that's the universe, because it's so distant in the future that knowledge is lost and passed down and altered and changed, and not everybody knows this knowledge, and that's what's presented to us. It's very clever.
And I think that's where we'll probably begin. So obviously this is a chat show, but it's also going to be a painting show. So we're going to paint some minis, and we're going to just enjoy what we're doing while Alex chats away. And obviously, like already in chat, you had said that we had our mics muted, which is fucking great for the first episode. What's that? But yeah, guys, if you're in chat and you have any questions about 40k, I will prod Alex and see if we can get an answer out of him. But as always, if the volume levels of things like the music to us talking is too loud, let us know and we'll try and keep an eye on that.
I'd say it's a dry run, but it's a practice run, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a session zero of kind of what is 40k, really. Yeah. So, Alex, what is 40k?
Shit, man, I don't know. 40k, or Warhammer 40,000, is a science fictional tabletop game, which is largely focused around battles and conflicts with multiple races, multiple narratives that you can use. That's it in the nuttest of nutshells, really.
And when is it set? Is it like a Star Wars thing where it's in a galaxy far, far away? Or is it...
So 40k is set in the distant future, the 41st millennium, but the current narrative is now bridging into the 42nd millennium. But the history begins right back until, 60 million years ago is the earliest nugget of information we get in the 40k universe, even though the current narrative is set in the 41st millennium. If that makes sense, that's great, but...
And that's kind of the bits, isn't it? So it's
you just need to know about roughly the last 10,000 years is probably the most important bit you need to know.
And you say last 10,000 years, you mean from our timeline right now, or from the 40k verse? So 30,000 onwards, yeah?
So I need to start dividing this.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the best thing. So where do we begin when we're talking about 40k? We know that we're talking about like a war game that is, it's a war game. It's been around since what, the 80s, 90s.
I think 80s.
Yeah, and
early
you
80s.
know, most people know like the Ultramarines, and they know.
It's expanded a lot over the decades.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I'm painting Tau, which is a relatively new addition in
yeah, I'd say
Warhammer.
early 2000s. I think the Tyranids, which
one of the first.
I say Tyranids. Some people call them Tyranids. I prefer Tyranids because the planet Tyran. We'll get into that one day. I think Space Marines and, if I'm not mistaken, the Tyranids were the first. It was basically, you know, Alien.
Yeah, and
That
I
was
think because it was Space Hulk, wasn't it? That was
Yeah,
like kind of like one of the first games.
Yeah.
And
Spaceship corridors, aliens, big guns.
and they do. I mean, I'll probably switch to that camera there so you can show off what you're going to be painting.
Oh, yeah. So this one is a Tyranid Gene Stealer, which I've attached a human skull because I kind of wanted it to look a bit more
Come on, focus.
Dead Spacey. I don't know if you can see that.
It will focus.
Damn it.
You know, when I was like earlier, I was like, hey, we can use that piece of card.
Yeah.
Let's get that
Where's
out.
the piece of card?
That's right there. Just in case it decides it's not going to focus. Sometimes it needs just a little help. Or not.
Well, anyway,
Yeah, so...
you can sort of see that.
No, the camera's better than that. Anyway, Tyranids
Oh, there you go.
are basically xenomorphs, really. And
Yeah.
that's what I thought when I first saw them when I was kind of a wee kid.
Yeah, so Tyranids are basically this extra galactic alien species that is a big part of the current narrative, but hasn't always been there. Relatively in the timeline, they're quite a recent thing. But yeah, anyway. So talking about timelines. Ah, man, fuck me.
It's a lot. Already, like, it's kind of like a big mine hole to kind of like mine hole to go down, like a rabbit hole to go down.
It's
Because-
it's quite.
In depth.
Yeah.
There's a lot to take in.
40k is quite intimidating to a lot of people because just the scale of it, the expanse, the timelines, the complex narratives, the history, all these different races is crazy. But I think what you need to know is it's basically a story about humanity. That's pretty much a recurring theme in a lot of science fictions. We're humans. We want to know what the story of humans is. We're always the protagonist, whether that's for good or ill. So we are the Imperium of Man, or the Imperium of Mankind, humankind. The Imperium of Humankind has existed in its current state for the last 10,000 years.
So that sounds like early 30,000.
Yeah, so that's going from the 41st millennium back to the sort of roughly the 30th millennium.
Yeah.
So you have these 10,000 years of pretty much human supremacy where every other alien species is bad, and if they get in your way, humans are going to do their very best to get rid of them.
So xenophobic.
Yeah, very much so. That's changing now with the current narratives, with like alliances and things like that.
But we'll get to that because I think
Yeah,
that's to do with is it Gulliman and the Eldari?
That's
Is
10th
it?
edition. That's not quite out yet. Well, 9th, 10th.
Yeah. So we'll get to that in time.
Yeah.
We'll still talk about what 40k
I'm
is.
digressing already, man.
No, you're fine,
Brain's
and that's
back
kind
now.
of like why I want you here, because you can go down.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're painting as well. I forgot about that.
See, yeah, straight away. That's like how far it goes into it.
Yeah.
But the narrative of 40k is kind of like what
Yeah.
I'm here for. So obviously, you're saying it starts with Tyranids and the Ultramarines were sort of like the first things, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
And these come from what I gather is like alien. Like people wanted, xenomorphs, and they wanted
that 80s sort of. Yeah.
power armor and sci-fi-ness to it, where you'd have the great big humans that were the good guys and the bad guys that were these monstrous aliens that would carry on.
Yeah.
That was kind of like my understanding of it, and being a fan of Alien and wanting to kind of play stuff like that. And I know that all of my friends, when I was certainly a teenager, went into playing Ultramarines and Space Marines, especially Blood Angels. I think was a popular one because that was like the alternate color scheme. And I was like, nah, I'm going to take the Xenomorphs and I'm going to paint them black and I'm going to have Xenomorphs.
Yeah.
And
That's cool.
yeah, but at the time I was kind of like shit at painting and it just wasn't my thing. And I was just like, you know what? I think because I was so young, I was like, I'm just gonna not, because I felt like I was like kind of like not doing that.
I was the same.
And I didn't get into the lore at all, even in the slightest, because I just wanted to buy minis, chop them apart, put different bits on them, and then that was kind of it. And then it wasn't until actually talking to you and talking about the start of kind of like what 40k is where it kind of really kind of got me wanting to buy a set and paint them and then learn to play.
Yeah.
And obviously then they started saying that they're going to bring out 10th edition and 10th editions, where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to wait to buy the 10th edition core rulebook, and I'm going to wait for you to teach me how to play. And then we're going to start this show where we just chat about the lore and hopefully somebody can learn something.
Yeah.
But, so it started with the Ultramarines and the Tyranids, and
Yeah, so
we all sort of know that.
Started smack bang in the sort of 41st millennium when the whole narrative started as a franchise.
Yeah. And I guess when we look at 40k, like, we look at, we'll take those two factions to begin with and have a look at, you know, Tyranids and Ultramarines. Well, basically, it's like Space Marines. Those are the Imperium of Man. So anybody, any Space Marines, any Imperial Guard, anybody who's basically human is the Imperium of Man. And we'll get to Chaos later. We're just going to treat humans as the Imperium of Man, from my understanding.
We'll get to post-humans too. That's that's your standard space.
Warrior Dawn of War impacts. Yeah, so we've got humans are your Space Marines, basically, and we'll get to them being souped up, and Alex will talk about what's actually inside a suit of power armor and whatnot.
Yeah.
Tyranids are kind of like the bad guys. That's where it sort of started. Then other factions to come from that were...
I think... I don't know what came next. Maybe Orcs? But I really can't be sure. I'm not actually that great on my sort of early history of the game, basically.
Well, less about the game, more about the lore. So the other factions that we've got, so like one of the main other races that we see within the 41st millennium. So obviously, I'm painting up the Tau right now, and these I know what little I know from the one book I've listened to as an audiobook, which was the first of the Farsight books.
I've not actually read that.
And it was all about just how like he kind of the Farsight Enclave. So he gets sent away because they're like, right, you're becoming a nuisance. Off you go. But like, so the Tau are a race of beings, as far as I'm aware, that have come up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So whereas the Imperium of Man, you know, we are right now, you and I sat here at our computers or our phones or whatever, the Imperium of Man, just way before the 31st millennium.
Yeah.
The Tau in the 31st millennium, up to the 40th millennium, I believe, or 41st, were primitive. They were like only just learning what fire was, only just like beginning to communicate.
They've advanced at a crazy rate.
But yeah, they've evolved and advanced to like having like AI technology and stuff within 10,000 years. Which the humans, when they first found them, I think it was an Inquisitor or something you said, was basically like, hey, they're gonna progress, but we've got other things to deal with, so we'll wipe them out later. Yeah. And so the humans go on a big rampage around the galaxy, wiping out anybody who's not human, and the Tau was supposed to be one of them. Then within 10,000 years, they went back to wipe them out, and the Tau fought them off, and that's when the Tau Empire started.
I think it was shorter than that. I think it was like 2,000 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
You tell me, buddy. But yeah, so I know the Tau slightly from one book, and that's it.
Yeah.
So we've got Tau, we've got Tyranids, we've got Ultramarines, Orcs. What are the Orcs?
So the Orcs exist for no other reason than to basically war with other races. That's what they get off on. That's what they're designed for. They have a rich history, which we'll get into one day, I'm sure. But yeah, their primary function is just to invade planets, kill everything, and do it for the fun of it. It's Orcs. I don't know if there's any more.
So yeah, and they're kind of like
they're in for the good fight, basically.
Yeah, and they're the scrappers, and like I think anybody playing other systems, you know, right the way from D&D, which we play together, to you know, Tolkien style orcs and stuff like that, they are kind of like your warring race, and they are sort of like, you know, depicted in such ways. But in 40k, from what I gather, they are like just destruction is their thing. They just want one thing.
Your Mad Max sort of vibes of technology, everything's sort of welded together, big guns, big engines, speed, and axes.
Nice.
And yeah, that's just what they get off on.
So, Orcs have done. A quick overview of who the Eldari are, and because I know them. So, Dark Elves and Light Elves, or the Eldar and the Dark Eldar, is how I knew them when I was a teenager. But they changed that, didn't they?
Yes, they did. I don't know why. I think it was something to do with copyright, or I don't know. I'm not actually quite knowledgeable on that subject, but yeah. So they're basically the space elves. The Eldar is the best way to describe them.
Cool. And I think I'm going to pull you onto those again in a bit as we start to talk more about the Imperium of Man.
Yeah.
And the Eldar gateways, or the Eldar pathway, or
the webways.
That's the one. We'll get to that in a bit. Yeah. So before you go down that rabbit hole, I'm going to stop you right there. Okay. I realised the whole premise of the show is that we have one cup that we're sharing for cleaning our paintbrushes, hence the name, and I'm over here using my pure water.
Oh, is that your drink?
No, that's just
right.
my pure water for changing tones. So I'm going to move that over there.
You got anybody posting?
So, hey, Band of Badgers, and hey, Dragon School Studios. Good to see you. Fluffy as always. Warrior Prince, good to see you. Hey, I'll say your name properly. Big Tooth Pete, compared to the other night. Good to see you. Thanks for all shouting out about the mics at the start. That seems to be a common trait for me. We're going to be chatting about 40k and sort of like what the basics of it are to begin with in terms of the lore. I'm going to be asking Alex questions. Big Tough Pete. Big Tough Poop, as Badger said, yes. Big Tooth Poop. That was funny. Yeah, we're going to be talking about 40k and the basics about lore behind it. We're covering, at the moment, some of the factions. So we've talked about the Ultramarines and how they're the Imperium of Man. We've talked about the Orcs. We've talked about the Tau very quickly, and the Tyranids, who are your, like, space xenomorphs. The Tau being the Gundam suits of it, and the Orcs being the
Very much so.
I want to fight everything.
Yeah.
The Eldari and the Jurukai, how do you say it?
Drukari.
Drukari.
They're basically, the Dark Eldar, or the Dark Elves.
And they were murder fucked into existence. No, they murder fucked a god into existence.
Yes, they did, and then they all got fucked.
That's it. So, we'll cover this in a whole other thing, but the words are murder fucked a god into existence.
Yeah.
That's how dark the Dark Elves are. And for those who don't know much about the lore, from what I've learnt so far and what Alex has told me, when they talk about the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, they mean it. It is freaking grim. It's bleak. It is
dystopian.
Yeah.
Apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic.
And the reason it's like that, and we'll start coming back to what 40k is because the Empire of Man and technology has fallen or something like that.
Yeah, so I should probably talk about the timeline. So we talked about you need to worry. Well, the current narrative is the last 10,000 years is a thing to remember. So we have the age of the Imperium, which is from the 41st millennium back to the 30th millennium, I think it is, roughly. So that's about 10,000 years, roughly. Before that, we had something called the Age of Strife, which lasted about 10,000 years. There were a few things happened in between the Imperium of Man and the Age of Strife, but we'll get into that later. So the Age of Strife was basically the darkest period of human history in which humanity just completely lost everything that made them special, basically, in terms of like technology and understanding and philosophy, that kind of thing. So that's...
But is that because the technology was so good that losing it was their entire life? So I think the words was the zenith, you said the other day.
The zenith of...
Yeah.
I'm getting so carried away with it. So, there was something called... So,
Golden Age?
Yeah, think about humanity as it exists now. So, in the early stages of 40k, we exist as we do now. And then by I think it's the 15th millennium, we really started to exponentially progress in terms of science and understanding. We started to go out to different solar systems, spacefaring species, all that stuff. And there was a period that lasted from the 15th millennium till about the 25th millennium, so that's 10,000 years of basically science being the main religion of humanity. And when I say the main religion, I mean everything was just godlike levels of technology. The technological understanding of the human species was bordering on ludicrous. It was just so far out. I think we basically almost achieved everything we'd ever dreamed of. And then, of course, that has to go...
Well, everything has to fall. Every kingdom, everything where... and that's kind of like, the Ozymandias kind of effect. Everything that you see within the kingdom eventually crumbles to nothing. But I think the thing to take from that is the technology was around. And as we know, as sort of... humans and living beings that it doesn't disappear and vanish into nothing. It has to remain. And was it STCs you were telling me about?
STCs.
And these are like the things that at the height of human zenith, the zenith of human technology, the golden age of man.
Yeah.
An STC is like an AI that can basically, you ask it for something and it makes it for you, or something like that.
So the greatest asset of humanity was their collective knowledge, which they stored in these things called STCs, standard template constructs, or standard template constructors, which basically like a super computer 3D printer sort of thing. You know, you
It's a replicator.
Yeah. You land on your planet, you have a problem, you ask the STC what to do about it, and it gives you the answer, basically.
And that could be
whether that's manufacturing or if that's
medicine or war, or it will create templates for you that you then can manufacture, basically.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the greatest thing humanity. Well, that was what was responsible for them to spread out into the galaxy, basically, at such a fast rate.
Yeah, and now obviously, like, that golden age collapses, and everyone goes into chaos or whatever happens, and I'll let you explain that shortly. But no, let's do that now. So, like, everyone's got these STCs, everyone's got, like, all this technology. We can just go to another planet, put down a habitation and go, what do we need? And the STC goes, X, Y, Z, go build these.
Yeah.
And here's all the parts and here's everything that you need to do it. Then what happens?
So, robots. That's what happens. So AI, basically, AI reached its most advanced stage and rebelled against humanity, as it often does in science fiction narratives. And this is a war that lasted for thousands of years, eventually leading to humanity winning. But they basically had nothing left after that. That was it. One thing, it's kind of like a sort of snowball effect of shit going wrong, trading routes that planets relied on collapsed.
So they become, like, isolated, so then they've got nothing left.
That's right, and there's other parts of why that was happening, but we'll discuss that.
Yeah.
Fuck, man, there's so much.
Yeah, it's all right. And that's kind of, like, why I think this series is the kind of... It's why I want to go through it, because, like, although I have a brief overview from what you've told me and I can pick bits, actually, I want to know more in depth, and I certainly know that other people do while we sit here and just paint some minis.
Yeah.
And so this happens, and that's... they're the Men of Iron, right?
Yeah, so humanity was split into, I think it was 3 categories, I suppose I'd call them. So there was the Men of Gold, which I guess are just sort of like...
We don't really know, do we?
No. I would guess that they are your baseline human, if not genetically altered to some degree, which was probably your most like us. But we had all this scientific understanding, you know, each person was a complete master in whatever field they were studying. We're just crazy. And then they created something called the Men of Stone. The Men of Stone. Which I suppose I like to think it in terms of, like, androids and replicants, that sort of thing. I could be wrong about that, but...
So this is the thing. You say this is how you like to think of it.
Yeah.
Because we don't know.
Yeah.
So, like, although these are things that are written down, it is written down in the most vague of terms, yeah?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be able to go to this book and this is the words here, and neither are you, I don't think. Because I think 60, how many books in are you?
Well, that's just
and that's just a heresy, like, yeah, so... they're spoken about in, like, a few lines, and then people have to, you know, read between the lines and sort of work out what they are.
Pretty much.
So there's the the Golden Men, or the Men of Gold.
So the Men of Gold are the first sort of peoples, and then they needed to spread out across the galaxy, so they created something called the Men of Stone.
Where they're like a work of force.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. In turn, once they were sort of established, they needed something to help them protect themselves and push their interests further, so they created something called the Men of Iron.
And they were combative, yeah?
Yeah, they were basically your AI. Your
Terminators.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's sort of when the war starts,
yeah? So the war starts. I think by this point the Men of Gold sort of, like, lost their influence, and humanity was so spread out that you couldn't really govern all these different sets of humanity.
Yeah.
So eventually the Men of Iron, and we still don't quite understand why, rebelled against the Men of Stone and the Men of Gold. It was a calamitous war that...
destroyed the zenith of human...
Yeah.
So basically put us into the apocalypse, where humanity is then just trying to claw its way back to being the prime
and all this crazy levels, ludicrous levels of technology was pretty much lost. Only remained so in fragments of STCs, that kind of thing. Some planets were able to keep hold of certain technologies, blueprints, that kind of thing. But for the main part, humanity has now fallen into the pits of barbarism and is no longer really the race it once was.
So, obviously, like, looking at that then, humanity falls and is just clawing to stay alive. They win the war of against the Men of Iron.
It's worth mentioning, at this point, when humanity collapses, it's open season for all these different alien races.
There we go.
Yeah.
This is where humanity then becomes massively xenophobic.
Yeah.
So to survive, from what I understand, humanity's sort of only way to go is like as soon as anybody who's not human comes near them, and even half of the humans that come near them, it's like kill on sight.
Yeah, you
just
have
instant death.
You have a mutation, you're not human, dead.
Yes, and we'll get to the kind of Emperor of Man and that kind of thing later on because that's.
Yeah, that's like the darkest side of 40k. It's more sort of. I guess there are different planets have different levels of acceptance and things like that. But yeah, in the main part, very xenophobic. Yeah,
so we take because obviously Earth's called Terra, is it not?
Yeah, so Earth is called Terra in the 41st millennium, and has been since pretty much pre-Age of Strife, which is what we'll discuss next, I guess.
Yes.
So sorry, go on.
No, you carry on. You please do. You're the guy that knows it all. I'm just trying to pull information out of you.
Yeah, so the next thing we have is the Age of Strife, which is humanity existing in its post-apocalyptic form, where a very small handful of planets are doing okay, but for the main part, humanity is just scratching a living off rock and has no real understanding of technological functions, science, that kind of thing. And that's where you get things like other races coming in for either just to wipe out the planet or enslavement, those kinds of things, food. So humanity is just absolutely fucked in every sense of the word.
Hello, Jack, how are you?
Oh, we got Wood here.
Yeah, she's there in the chat. Nice. Sorry. Yes, your favourite D&D lads. Long live Nurgle in the Chaos. Okay, so Dragon Skull. Chaos is a whole different entity. We'll get to that, I think, separately. Because obviously there's the gods of Chaos.
That deserves its own.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about it, but...
and I'll pull you into that, because obviously I mentioned Slash earlier. Yeah. And so I know that Nurgle is one of the Chaos gods, and there's 4?
4.
Originally 3.
That's right, yeah. Originally 3, now there's 4. 10th edition, there could possibly be a 5th. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. There's a lot to be revealed. But yeah, so...
4 basically devils.
Yeah. So, how do I best describe...
I think we'll go into that in a different thing. But they basically rule over...
I want to give the Chaos fan justice, but
we will. Yeah. Don't worry.
But I'm just wondering how...
As a brief overview, Chaos is the entropy of the 40k verse. It wants to destroy, it wants to consume, and it wants to basically see an end to everything.
Yeah. So, the warp is something that humanity discovered round about the 15th, 20th millennium.
So at the height of
maybe just
the Golden Age.
Just before the Golden Age. And what the warp is, or the immaterium, is a separate dimension where reality is non-existent, physical is non-existent, and it all exists as a realm of energy, basically. This energy, over thousands, millions of years, coagulates, forms into things that basically they turn into entities themselves.
Like demons and...
Yeah, you've got all this energy, and it's things like people's thoughts, people's actions, all this over millions of years forms into...
So it's like all the negative energy of somebody's like... If you go and murder somebody, that negative energy then gets sucked into the warp, I guess.
It's basically like the extra-dimensional realm of, your thoughts must go somewhere, and that kind of thing. Yeah,
it's a long rabbit hole to go down. I'm going to pull you away from the Chaos thing.
Yeah, it is.
But so they're the 4 gods of Chaos, and they sort of like rule that, and they try and twist and warp people to become their followers, which is how you end up with the Chaos armies, from what I understand.
That's right.
And each one has like its own sort of legions, just like the Space Marines and stuff, but they're more kind of like nasty. And that's probably one of the other factions that we should probably come back to is Chaos.
The reason I brought the warp up is because humanity was heavily reliant upon the warp to traverse the galaxy, basically.
That's what
it's faster than light. Is a means of faster than light travel to slip into another plane, and if you can slip into a plane where time and space doesn't exist, you can end up in the time and space that you require. Fuck me, I don't know how it works, but that's what.
Again, I think that's another one of those like things that it's basically traveling about the solar system. It's a way of explaining for the 40k versus
so this is
light speed, warp travel, hypersleep. But you have to like literally go into another plane of existence, which is pretty much ruled by emotion and the gods of chaos. And then that's sort of like where people get lost, or where negativity can manifest into a being. Yeah, I guess is the best way to do it.
What would you call it? A
Death God army. What are they?
Death God army. Death God.
So Dragon Skull says, I have plans to paint and learn to play. It's a Death God army.
The Death Guard are a Chaos Space Marine faction. They worship the god Nurgle, which is basically the god of entropy and death and rebirth. Go figure. Yeah. So that's a Space Marine faction. That was a once loyalist Space Marine faction.
And we'll get to that, I think, when we talk about the Emperor of Man, what loyalist means.
So many segues, man.
Yeah.
This is what I love about 40k, is that...
But that's who the Death Guard are.
Yeah.
Hey, Maguire Review. Hey, Josh. How you doing? Thanks, man. Tuning in for a little bit. Loving the approach here with the lore. Thanks. I know next to nothing about it, but my boy Alex here...
I'm trying to deliver this knowledge in a very concise...
But that's, I think,
easy to follow, but I think my brain's just going...
Yeah.
So you're going to have to deal with that.
Because we're going to vomit.
Yeah.
Well, Alex is going to vomit 40k over you, and I'm just going to try and bring him in to what is 40k for this episode as a whole. So we're going to keep going through the factions. Yeah. So that's a little bit about chaos and some of them.
So the reason I brought the warp up is because humans were reliant upon this faster than light means of travel, which they'd lost pretty much.
And that separated all the humans across the galaxy.
Yeah, so humans could no longer traverse. All these trade routes collapsed. Planets were left to fend for themselves, having to face these alien races that began to war upon them because they were no longer fit. I mean, humanity was, and I'm talking godlike levels of technology. Other races feared humanity.
So for them to lose everything made them like, oh shit, we can now be the prime race. Let's go get them while they're weak.
You had like things like non-aggression pacts between the most violent alien races and humanity. That's the levels of technology we're talking about.
So they were pretty powerful before they lost it all.
So when they lost it all and they lost their access to the warp, in the main part, you have something called the Age of Strife, which lasted roughly 5,000 years, and that is, as we mentioned earlier, scratching a living off bare rock.
So okay, I think. From what you've told me before and from what I've read, the Age of Strife is important here.
Yeah.
Because this is obviously like, there are many stories that come from it, and it's like the Emperor of Man, who we will get to in a whole different video, because like, I had to delve deep on the Emperor of Man just to kind of understand 40k and how the game minis are, let alone what Alex knows about the lore and from what you've read, and why the Horus Heresy books are such a long-running series and why they're important.
Yeah.
And I think that the Emperor of Man is a whole thing, and we'll get to who that is and why he's important and powerful. And as I take myself on a tangent, I instantly forget what I was talking about. The Age of Strife. The Age of Strife.
That's right.
We'll get there. We'll reel each other in.
What the fuck are we doing here?
Hi, totally professional.
Shit, we're still on mute, man.
So the Age of Strife, and this is so like humanity being so powerful and basically being the masters of the universe. You are in charge. If you are the prime race, you are in charge. Everybody fears you. You get what you want, and although you're, I suppose, like not necessarily as we're going to get to in the Grim Dark, but it is like that if you're the powerful one, everyone's going to come to you for stuff, and you're going to get better stuff. That's just how money talks.
Yeah,
basically. When your currency is technology. The people with the most technology are going to win, which is why the Tau...
You don't want to fuck with them, basically.
Yeah, and that's why the Tau are now a problem for the human race. And we'll get to that.
We'll get to everything.
We'll get to it. We're going to keep saying we'll get to that. And that's probably going to be, apart from our shitty little paint show, the second tagline.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. That's a good idea. So, Age of Strife. So we talked about the warp, and now that everything is a mess, you start having things like alien invasions. You start having people accessing the warp, which we'll get to that. So this is where like sorcery and
yes,
things start coming into.
Because this ties back into chaos. Yes,
Yeah.
Perfect. So the warp, the Age of Strife, and chaos. This is kind of where it comes in. So psychers and magic, because obviously magic's a thing. In 40k, so you can have with the tabletop game psychers, I believe they're called. They are your spellcasters, and some races have none, like the Tau, and they completely rely on their technology, whereas the humans have a lot of psychers. Am I right? Well, I say a lot, but you get psychers. I
mean, they're not the most psychically adept race,
but there are magic casters basically. But how does that come about when we're talking about a universe where we now are in that universe? It's only several tens of thousands of years in the future, but it's still the world. There's no magic now for me and you. So when we look at these stories and when we look at the 40k verse, where does that magic come from, and who are psychers and what do they do?
So humanity had knowledge of the warp, and that's what they used to traverse the galaxy. What they didn't quite know is what exactly the warp was or meant. And we talked about all these negative energies forming into these like entities. Evil entities, pretty much, because bad thoughts are stronger than positive thoughts, and that's how it works. So you started having things that I would basically describe as demonic possessions. As humanity became more sensitive to the warp through a means of the psychic awakening, we'll get to that. So humanity becomes more sensitive to the warp and its effects, and that manifests itself through. If you're a psyker and you don't have any knowledge of being a psyker and you don't know what to do or how to protect yourself, you basically get possessed by
demons.
The
chaos gods and demons and stuff, and they kind of come through and take over your mind and make you do bad things.
At this very early stage, and we talked about how all these alien races started attacking humanity and their planets because they couldn't really defend themselves anymore. As humanity started to become more adept or aware of the warp and what its uses could mean, we talked about Ozen's open season for alien races. I mean, it's fucking demons. Yeah.
So I think coming back to the psychers bit then. So you, in times like we are now, so 2023. We have no magic, but like those negative thoughts, people still have negative thoughts all the time, and people still, that builds up, and that's kind of like what it plays on. Is that like right now, we haven't accessed the warp, so we haven't released the sort of entities of chaos into the universe, and they certainly haven't started like trying to work their way, and they almost use humans as a channel or as a vessel to kind of break through into our reality,
into real space,
and so I think that's what it is. But that access to the warp gave people that kind of psychic ability and that access to warp time and space around them. Is that?
That's right. Yeah, I forgot to mention the navigators. So during
there's going to be a lot of I forgot to mention.
Yeah. So during this zenith of human technology, humans also created another off-branch of the human species called navigators, which were basically humans which were able to see into the warp and traverse the warp to get from one place to the other. They basically got like a genetically surgically implanted third eye. They're tall. They've got, I think they've got sort of translucent skin. They look different, and they are different, but they're a branch of humanity which has this ability to see into the warp. If you were to look into God, we'll get to this.
Keep going.
If you were to look into the third eye of a navigator, you would just lose your mind.
And then that's because we're not psychically inept. We're not magical. We're not. So I guess it's.
They're able to see into the warp, but not be affected in a physical sense.
Yeah. So I guess
they
that's
can
it.
Just
really.
perceive it.
Yeah. So they can view it without being taken over or possessed, and it doesn't warp them. It doesn't manifest in them in a negative way.
They're fucked. Like they are like, I think within every ship is a navigator's room, and it's basically balloons, teddies, all nice things.
So they're nuts.
Because their existence is their job is basically to look into hell for a living. So when they're not in hell, they're trying to get some iron out. I just want to go. I just want my teddy. Yeah.
And so I think that's probably the best layman's example, I think, for me personally. Is
God, I hope so.
Well, I get that, and hopefully other people do. And in all fairness, you're here to teach me more about 40k.
So, anyway, I digressed.
So we've gone to the Age of Strife, and how that's brought about the psychic awakening in humanity.
Yeah. So humans begin to be more psychically aware, and then you have people who are more. Well, there are some people that are able to control this new power.
And what does that mean? Like, what can they do with this new power?
So they can summon demons, for one thing. They can manipulate these warp energies into weaponry, that kind of thing. Just going around using this newfound power to shaft everybody else. And that's when you get like techno-barbarians, that kind of thing.
Techno-barbarians?
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
We'll get onto that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Because techno barbarians. I see the German guy in that video. It's just like, but
5,000 years of that.
That's. Yeah.
So you've got these basically witches and wizards is the best way to describe them, using these powers of the warp.
But they don't know where they come from.
They don't know where they're coming from. They just know that they can use them, and then everybody is just.
And I suppose that's kind of seductive and part of the warp, and that's like, I've got power, so now I'm in charge, and then...
So you have all these warring factions, and this isn't just Terra or Earth, this is like all over the galaxy, pretty much. You've got these people who are now psychically aware, and they want to use their advantage and fuck over other planets, other peoples, whatever. So this goes on for about 5,000 years.
Just a short spell.
Yeah. So... It's kind of like, think of the most awful atrocity in terms of weaponry, awful atrocities in terms of weaponry and magic and sorcery used to its most potent potential. And this is going on for 5,000 years. This is just like, everybody's having fun with this stuff. And then you've got demonic possessions, you've got things like the Enslavers, which were a fauna that come from the warp who fed on these early psychers because they didn't know how to protect themselves. Anyway, so that's the Age of Strife, and the lack of technological understanding only adds to that.
I say, and I think that's what's important, the lack of technological understanding. Because obviously, like, we had the Golden Age of Man, and in 5,000 years of the Age of Strife, all of it was forgotten. People were just surviving. People were just trying to get past as psychic powers and stuff all came to light, and people were just dying en masse. Other races were taking advantage of that, and the gods of chaos were breaking their way through into real space, into reality. And how did the Age of Strife end?
So the Age of Strife ended. It's worth talking about very briefly another race that we discussed called the Eldari, which are basically your space elves. So the Eldari have existed on their own as a technologically advanced race for the best part of 60 million years, and they are very sensitive to the warp. They're born wizards. You know, they have such a connection to the warp that they're able to utilize its power pretty much from birth. So they have basically a 60 million year existence, to which by the end of it they have plunged into the deepest, darkest depths of depravity.
Why is that?
Because they can basically come back. So the Eldar exist in such a way that their spirits come back to reality, basically. So
they can't die. They rebirth.
They're reborn. They can, they can go and check out the latest, what it feels like to get a rib cut out, and then die, and then come back and say, "Cool, that was cool. I'm going to see what it feels like to have my eyes torn out whilst somebody is taking a shit on my back." That kind of stuff.
So, and I think what we need to ask is why there, because I think that
excess. I think is because when you've existed for 60 million years,
things get boring. You got to spice it up a little bit,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
You know, this is only episode 1, but you know, it's 2 guys, 1 cup. It's
Yeah. Well, 1 cup of water.
yeah, it's it. You know, just
I
a
could
watch
that
out
possibly
painting. Yeah, so I think from what you were telling me, so the elves, the Eldari,
Yeah, we'll go with Eldari.
they've lived for so long that they've tried everything. And when you've tried
they've done
everything, you've then got to start morally going, all right, well, I'm going to now go and I'm going to eat that guy's plate of chips.
Yeah.
And it starts with like stealing something and see what that feels like, to
And
the point where
isn't-
you murder fuck a god into existence.
This isn't every Eldari. This is the vast majority of the civilization. But you know, you have some sects that saw this happening, was like, we don't want anything to do with this. We're going to go and live on the fringes of the galaxy, living a nomadic lifestyle. We'll get to that. So you have something pretty much just a disgusting, excessive race plunged in depravity. So all this negative warp energy is building and building and building, and this is what disrupts the warp for humanity, because they're not able to use the warp now as an effective means of transportation. So this is part of the picture of why humanity loses their
Seat of power.
yeah, pretty much. One day, all this energy basically births a god into existence, and this god is called Slanesh, which is the god
Long
of...
may she reign.
Yeah, long may she thirst. She's basically, I think it's kind of a sort of, what's the word? Ambiguous, is it?
Ambiguous, yeah?
Yeah, kind of, you don't really know what this being is, but it is the god of basically excess and pleasure and pain and everything disgusting you can think of in terms of physical sensations. And in turn, this completely, in a blink of an eye, wipes out 99.9% of the Eldari civilization.
Yeah, because it's such a psychic, magical explosion of a god being birthed from their negative energies that the rest of them, who are so sensitive to the warp, just gone.
Yeah, and this is a big reason why the warp is unusable this one, because all this energy before it becomes the Lanesh is bouncing around, and this warp realm is basically a shit show.
It's like a storm.
Yeah, you can't traverse it safely at the moment. When this god is born, the Eldari pretty much get wiped out and, you know, burnt from the inside, leaving these dry husks of carcasses. This once mighty, ancient, beyond technological understanding race is just reduced to nothing in the blink of an eye. The benefit of that is all this negative warp energy, now this god makes the warp relatively a bit more stable. So humans are now able to traverse the galaxy again.
So this is after they've been cut off for 5,000 years. Slanesh is born. Most of the Eldari, who have now become the prime race, are wiped out, leaving the throne open to for humanity to step up and try it. And humanity wasn't in the position really to unify themselves.
That's right, yeah.
So how did they reunify?
So this is where we start going into the current timeline. So the Age of Strife ends around the 30th millennium. So it starts from the 25th millennium to the 30th millennium.
And remember, if he's wrong, I'll give you his home address.
Yeah, and if I'm wrong, please, like, I love learning, so... Have we got any questions, by the way, just on the off?
I have been checking. Jack says hello, and the rest are just kind of like chatting away. It's just quite nice.
Have you got a house to get on with, Jack?
Crack the whip for him.
Yeah, sorry. I think maybe my brother's watching, I'm not sure.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Dan. So, how do we reunify the human race? At this point, they've got no technology. I'm guessing no way of travelling the warp.
Yeah.
They've got nothing left but some mad psychers and basically
nomadic tribes, techno-barbarians, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
So all this shit is still kind of happening, but now there are certain parts of, I guess the main planet would be Terra, Earth. People start to realise that shit isn't as bad as it was. And this is where the Emperor comes into. Do we start talking about the Emperor, or is it a bit too soon?
No, I think that an overview is absolutely fine because, like, this is the Emperor of Man is obviously important, and I know that because I've gone off and I've tried to learn as much as I can about him, and that's thanks to you. And I think there is definitely we're going to go down a rabbit hole with him anyway.
Yeah.
But we're going to go further into it, I think, later on. But so obviously humans are divided, and usually in times of strife and in times of great pain and stuff, somebody usually is the person to then go, right, I'm now in charge.
Yeah. So the Emperor, and we don't really know what the Emperor is, where he's from, or what he's doing. We do, but we don't. So the Emperor is a being in the appearance of a man who has existed for roughly... He's something called a perpetual, so he has been living for a very long time. I think at this point he's roughly 45,000 years old.
So he is, in our world, around now.
Yeah, so he's been not only around now, he's been around for the best part of 8,000 years.
Yeah, and also then has lived through the golden age of man and has...
Lived through the 21st century, the golden age of mankind, the age of strife. He's been there.
And then when the age of strife was over, he went, right, I'm now in a position where I'm going to be the Emperor of Man.
Yeah.
I'm in charge. What I say goes. Let's bring the humans back together.
Pretty much. And the reason he didn't really make an appearance is because humanity was doing fine on its own.
As you stole the question out of my mouth. It's like, if he's so powerful and so good, why wasn't he showing up before the point that humans needed him?
Because he would have had his own agenda. This advanced stage of humanity would have been able to deal with him quite easily. This is what we're talking about in terms of technology. So he comes along and he basically goes, "Fuck it, I'll do it myself." And he has, as you would, the gift of foresight. So he's able to see the very narrow path which humanity needs to walk in order to survive as a species. So he becomes the Emperor. He doesn't call himself that immediately. He's basically the best of whatever's left on Earth. He is one of many techno-barbarians, arguably the best at this time.
Because Earth's just in chaos and just warring, the whole planet is just a bloodbath of people fighting each other because of the Age of Strife.
Yeah.
And then he is this muscular overlord of war who basically has lived for tens of thousands of years and then goes, right, now that psychic storm is over...
Yeah. Let's do this.
I'm going to kill all of you and I'm in charge, but also...
Yeah. What is it? Comply or die, basically. So he basically wants you to see him as this big, strong, muscular man as well. Like, this is what we perceive, but we don't actually know what his real form is. Or if he's human
is the Emperor immortal or merely a construct? Haha, that answers that one. Don't worry, we got straight to it.
So because he's been around for so many thousands of years, he does have a grasp of technological understanding that has been. So he is able to retain, not everything, but he's able to retain
a lot of the technological information to pass on.
Yeah, and he's like, he's been in hiding for thousands of years, and I think his laboratory is like in the Himalayas or something like that.
Okay, so obviously, like, he's a techno-barbarian.
Yeah.
So somebody who, like, we say barbarian, and, like, I certainly know for me as a dungeon master, I think of, low intelligence and swinging a sword or an axe, and that's it. But in this case, he's not.
That kind of stuff. You've got people driving these crazy engines with flames coming out their back.
But he's like...
No, he's pretty switched on. He's above that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What he does have is this crazy level of technological understanding comparatively to everybody else. Tripping over my own words.
So he's bigger, he's stronger, he's smarter than everyone.
Yeah.
It's basically what we're getting at there.
Yeah.
He is the zenith of humanity.
He is.
He is basically the alpha, the omega, in regards to what's left on Earth.
Yeah.
And has lived longer than anybody that's left on Earth.
Yeah.
Or anyone that ever has been on Earth.
That's right, yeah.
Which in itself questions if he is even human.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, what his origins are, we just don't know. If he's human to begin with, if he was brought here by another race, because there's other races that create it.
We'll get to that. That I'm going to bring you to that towards the end of this particular show, because we're actually an hour in.
Shit, man.
Really? Yeah, which is pretty crazy that we've been I've been getting you to chat Warhammer for an hour. So, if people are still following along and I'm having a good time, I'm going to keep delving Alex's lore mind.
Oh, done. Okay, there we go.
Is that your brother? Is it?
He is. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? So the Emperor, this all-knowing, all-powerful at this point being of, and he's not just powerful. He's also a psyker, right? Like the most powerful, in-control psyker that there has ever been.
Potent psyker that we've seen to date.
So, and this means that like his magical energy is so strong that nothing has ever come close in the entirety of the 40k lore.
Not at this point, no.
That we know of.
Yeah.
So, that's how powerful he sort of is. He's at god level himself, basically, is what I think the understanding / misunderstanding of the Emperor is that, like, some people are like...
He's a god, and then he's like...
I'm not a god.
I'm not a fucking god. Stop saying I'm a god. And then everybody's like, whatever, god.
Yeah, and I think that's probably another important thing to cover now is that, like... Obviously, when we talk about gods and we talk about things, because obviously with D&D, the gods are real. That's one of the things written into the Dungeon Master's Guide is like, the gods are real, and that's how you can give players things. It's how you can dictate rules. It's how you can, set worlds and make things and magic works and stuff. And obviously for 40k, which comes from the original Warhammer, magic has to come from somewhere. And obviously in 40k, I imagine that is obviously the Warp, the Psychers. And at this point, you're like, okay, so the gods are real, and we know that through the Chaos Gods, but the Emperor is so anti-religion that he's like, right, I'm going to wipe out all religion, because religion's what's killing everybody.
Yeah, so he's obviously seen this peak of human civilization where science is the main religion.
And that's in the far future, like his narrow view of like how humanity, after the Age of Strife...
I'm talking about like the Dark Age of technology, or the Golden Age of humanity.
Yeah,
so,
okay,
Millennium 15 to 25. He's seen that. That's why he hasn't stepped up before, because he's like...
No, they're doing all right.
They're doing all right. It's a secular society.
I don't need to be here.
Yeah, I don't need to...
Let the kids play.
Pretty much,
yeah.
Fuck, where was I?
But then, like, obviously, like, with there being no religion, even though the gods are real...
So that's it, yeah. He comes back, he as he does, he makes an appearance, and then he basically says, right... I want humanity. I see this narrow path humanity has to walk upon. I'm paraphrasing here. But he basically wants to reenact a secular society in which religion has very little, if nothing at all, to do with it. He wants to bring humanity back to a glimpse. I'm talking a fucking glimpse of that technological achievement that existed before. Because...
even if it's just a glimpse of it, that would put you back in the seat of power in the galaxy.
Yeah. So... We talked about he is able to retain knowledge over these thousands of years during the Age of Strife as well. And he's basically been in hiding. One of these, some of this knowledge is genetics, genetic engineering, genetic enhancements, basically.
Gene splicing?
I'm trying to think of the...
If anybody in chat knows.
Yeah. Genetic gene...
Fluffy, yeah, it really is. So Fluffy was like, it's interesting, but man, there's so much, and this is just a glimpse. Yeah, I mean, we are talking like, we're not even scratching the surface point. No. Like, obviously, I think, for me personally, I'm asking questions like I know.
Yeah.
But that's only because I've scratched the surface, and that's all I've done, whereas you've delved. Yeah. You are in there. I mean, like...
This is why I love 40k. There's so much mystery. There's so much we don't know.
You certainly know more than the rest of us. And that's kind of why we're here. So yeah, Fluffy, there is... I'm going to probably get Alex to cover the Emperor of Man in the next couple of videos, probably. It's probably going to take a few. Yeah. And that's without us even pulling things from books or anything like that. Just talking in general like we are now.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is just a glimpse of like how this war game is justified, like how each faction is justified. And at the moment, we're still only talking about essentially the Ultramarines and then Space Marines there on afterwards. Yeah. So he's into like genetic engineering.
Did anybody but the answer up? Interesting.
No, I think they're learning like me. Okay. But genetic engineering is sort of like his thing, like how to make humans better.
Yeah, post-human. and additions to the additions to the human physique that would make them tougher, able to go out into space, fight all these. Basically, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Big nasties.
Yeah, so he...
And not be squishy humans like you and I.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you could be the henchest man on Earth right now,
Yeah.
and it's nothing to what a Space Marine is.
No, not at all.
Because Space Marines are genetically enhanced humans.
Again, like, Space Marines are a refined version of what...
We're at now.
What came first, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, so, like, going to that bit, we're at the age of... Strife, the Emperor then comes in, he's really into genetic engineering, and then he's like, right... Is this where he starts creating this? The Thunder?
Yeah, Thunder Warriors. So basically, as we're coming out of the Age of Strife, we're now going into an era called the Unification Wars.
But he wants to wipe out religion at the same time.
Yeah.
That's where this is where we came in from.
Yeah. So the Unification Wars is basically the Emperor. He basically wants to conquer Earth. He wants to take back Earth, or Terra, and he wants to start leading humanity into the stars again. So this goes on for, I don't know, a fair few centuries. I'm not quite sure how long it goes on for. Possibly longer. Using his knowledge of genetics, he's able to make this really powerful yet very crude super soldier that is really fucking, like, basically like superhuman berserkers. They're really effective foot soldiers, and they basically spend the next few centuries just bringing everybody to heel.
Through power of conquest.
Yeah, I mean, there's we'll get to this. There's a story called The Last Church, in which the Emperor talks to the final priest on Earth, and the priest gives him an account of a battle he was in facing these Thunder Warriors, and it's something like a force of 50,000 humans, baseline humans, going against roughly 5,000, 6,000 Thunder Warriors, and these 50,000 humans just get fucking minced. Yeah. This is the level of, like...
Because that's what you sent to me was The Last Church, and it was the animation and stuff like that. Yeah. And I guess when we put this up on YouTube, we'll start linking, I think Lutin is who the person you sent it to? Yeah.
Lutin's my probably biggest source of inspiration for me.
Yeah, and then obviously, like, because I know you've read the books, and Lutin was like the only place that I really got any knowledge that.
Yeah, Lutin and what's the other one that I'm really into? Adeptus Ridiculus.
Yeah, and I think you sent me the Last Church on Earth.
Yeah,
which is like so interesting because when you look at the Emperor of Man, and we'll get to it, that like he goes on this like rampage with these Thunder Warriors, these pre-Space Marines, that are like this first genetic enhancement of humans.
And these Thunder Warriors, they're basically like the best of all these differing armies of techno-barbarians that he comes across, and he basically recruits them. And through some sort of genetic process, he's able to turn them into these post-humans. And they're very effective. They're also incredibly unstable.
What does that mean? As in, like, they're just more violent or prone to just, like, dying, or they just melt?
Well,
or...
they're a bit of everything, really. So, on a genetic level, because they're really crude and they're sort of like a means to an end, they do have a very unstable anatomy, where they would start bleeding from the nose or start growing these tumours. There's one account of a Thunder Warrior turning around in their own skin. That's the level of, like...
Turning around in your own skin.
That's the level of, like, berserk we're talking about. And these are basically his foot soldiers for a few seconds.
Take care, Dragon Skull. Great to see you in. Maybe cool. If we're still on, we'll catch you when you get back. But, yeah, thanks for coming along. And we'll... I'm sure I'll speak to you again soon. And, yeah, thanks.
Do you know what? I'm going to stop dry brush. I'm going to start putting some slap on this.
Well, yeah, I suppose this is a painting show, really, as well. So we'll get back to the Thunder Warriors in a second and them turning around in their own skin. So what are you painting up currently, and how are you painting it?
So I've got basically Tyranid Combat Patrol. So that's like a small army. I'm using the most basic, or one of the most basic techniques called, is it slapdash?
Yes, I think so.
So slapdash is basically a quick dry brush, a wash, and then whatever you want to add to that. So in this case, I've painted them all black, Don't know which.
So
which
if I put this one onto this particular camera, then you can use the thing
Cool.
there.
So that's what I've done. I've basically base
Right,
painted.
you may have to use your use this one.
Oh shit.
No, that's fine.
Sorry.
Tyranids!
There you go. So I've basically base painted all my Tyranids that colour. I'm then going to dry brush them a white, very roughly. Just put this on. And this is like easy stuff. Anyone can do this.
So it's literally Chaos Black
fine.
primer, or which primer are you using for that one?
That's Chaos Black, and then this is what's this? White. This is White Scar layer, or layer White Scar. That's just an average white paint.
Yeah.
So I'm dry brushing them like that, and that's my Brood Lord.
Ah, look at that!
Yeah. And then I'm going to put a red wash over that, which is...
So is this a contrast paint?
This is a contrast paint, yeah. So this is Blood Angels Red. Which camera is it? So that's that one there.
Nice.
So I'm going to slap that on top. And then once that dries, I'm going to reapply a little bit more white dry brush. And then I'm going to slap that with a tiny bit of Skeleton Horde, which is another contrast paint, which is basically like a brown wash. And eventually, because I kind of want my Tyranids to look a bit juicy, we looked at this in the beginning.
Was that when we were muted?
Yeah, probably was, yeah. So I bet
Hello there.
human... They don't always come with... Well, they don't come with human skulls, but...
No, you've kit bashed that, haven't you?
Yeah. That's a little... I mean, it should really look like... I mean, you can hold it up.
It'll focus in time.
Yeah.
People will catch
Focus.
up. Come on! Woo! Gonna put all the hands here!
Yeah, anyway, so it doesn't really have that skull. I wanted to put a human skull on it because I kind of wanted to go for the whole Dead Space
I like that vote.
aesthetic.
Yeah, I think you've got that. It's gory.
But yeah, I wanted it to look gory and juicy, you know,
Juicy.
because they are just these monsters.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Me personally, I've also got a combat troll. I picked this up when you first started talking to me about 40k, and this was what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And I was, I'd painted some Tyranids as a kid, and I was shit at it, really, to be honest.
Same.
I did some Katachan warriors, and I did a few Ultramarines, and then let's go slightly that way. There we go.
Juicy.
Yeah, I've gone for the Tau Empire, and this is a combat patrol from them. So you get like a load of base troopers, you get a load of drones, and basically battlesuits. This is like Gundam for 40 wing. 40 wing, 40k. Gundam wing for 40k. I think that spoke out to me because I was a big fan of that like clean looking aesthetic with sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I certainly know that you have like Mad Max, Dune kind of background to you and a lot of the things that you do, whereas I was like, no, I like that anime style, mechanical suits and like flying about, and I really liked that. So that's kind of why I went with the Tau, just because I liked how they were, and I knew nothing about them to begin with until you sort of started talking to me about them. And then obviously it's like Talvar, which means the greater good, which is the greater good, and that was sort of like me set then. They all worked together to try and expand from what I know. But I liked that they just had these really cool battle suits that I could then like stick a load of batteries on, or magnets on, and have them like open up and have their like suits within suits. So that was my kind of like whole reasoning for getting an army. And then I've just been holding off painting them until now, really.
They look awesome, man.
Well,
And your bases as well.
Well, it's kind of another reason I wanted to get into it is to practice some terrain basing. And I think the good thing about 40k is there are so many planets that like have not been discovered, and so many things that like sci-fi is great because you can just use wild colors. And I liked I think from Star Wars things like Felucia from Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars TV series, like the planet filled with like flora and fauna of like bright colors. So I really like the idea that my particular Tau Empire would be on this like purpley pink dusty planet, and it's got that like Geonosian feel to it, but also with like really neon tufts and stuff. So that's kind of where I began with those ones, really. So I'm currently painting up the Fire Carders. The Fire Carders are basic grunts.
Yeah.
Kind of like, so they're like your
foot soldier, really.
Yeah, so well, I guess
your Fire Warrior cast is
Fire Warrior. That's it. Yeah, because there's 4 casts of the Tau, and we'll get to that. But it basically is like some are foot soldiers, some are the Ethereals are like the Ethereal cast. They're like the Thinkers. The Water cast, is that it?
That's it.
Yeah.
There's Water cast, Fire cast, Air cast, and
Earth cast. And they've got different jobs in their empire.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But back to the Emperor of Man. I've got to remember which one's which here. There it is, that camera there. So the Emperor genetically engineers these really unstable creatures that become these techno-barbarians, and they basically...
They were techno-barbarians, they're now his army.
Yes. And they're Thunder
Warriors.
Thunder Warriors.
Yeah.
And it's why they're called Thunder Warriors.
Yeah. Why are they called Thunder Warriors?
Yes.
I don't actually know. I suppose that I think the emblem of the Emperor at this point was an eagle's head with a bolt of lightning. So I think there's some sort of connection there. Have we got any questions? What's going on?
No, Fluffy said juicy.
Hello there. Oh, we've got Obi-Wan.
Hello there. And I'll be painting that up this week. Yeah, I've got some more Legion stuff. I've got Obi-Wan coming.
Sorry,
oh, look at that. Sorry, let's... no, sorry, I'll put it on. So, Alex...
wash.
That is gnarly.
That's looking a bit more juicy now.
So, will you... come on. Will you, like, add a gloss to that in the end, or is it going to be...
I will, but that actually comes with the Skeleton Horde, which is actually a glossy finish. So that's what will make it a bit shinier.
Yeah. So yeah, he creates these genetically unstable ones because that's his whole thing. Is like trying to create better humans so that you can then go back out into the universe and re-get all of the human clans back together.
He kind of needs this sort of brute force approach because society on Earth or Terra is just fucked up at the moment. There's like these warring factions of techno-barbarians and people who are able to use the warp.
But he knows that that's unstable, and they don't.
Yeah. Basically. So he uses this brute force technique to basically reconquer Earth and bring humanity back into the fold, at least on
Earth, on Terra.
On an Earth, Terran level, yeah. So he does this over the course of a few centuries, I think it takes. And he's able to do this. He's able to unite the different continents, the different peoples, the different tribes. They all sort of capitulate and comply. Some are outright defeated and
that's in that as well as him trying to get rid of religion.
Yeah.
And so like, and that's sort of his premise to like conquer is to be like, right, religion and your beliefs are tearing you apart as a whole world.
Yeah.
It's over.
That's right.
There is no God.
Yeah. Go hard or go home.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing now. So he does this, and now he's done this, he basically wants to turn his attention to the stars. He wants to go back out into space and start with the solar system, but he basically wants to retake these lost human colonies. Yeah, he wants to go back to the outer planets and reunite humanity. Now we mentioned these Thunder Warriors. They're quite a crude design. They're powerful as fuck, but they are a very crude means to an end that he uses. So they're very effective at reconquering Earth.
But they're not going to make it out in the galaxy.
They're going to be complete, because they're basically just a brute force instrument. They have no real understanding of tactics or anything like that. They're just a brute force weapon. So yeah, when he wants to go out and reclaim the stars, they're not going to be good enough. He's going to need something more. So he begins to refine his designs, and he creates something that we call Space Marines, or the Adeptus Astartes, which I think is Gothic, which is the language they speak in the Imperium in the 41st millennium. For I think Adeptus is to retake or to conquer, Astartes is the stars, so they're there to retake the stars, basically.
And that's the whole point of the Space Marine, is to basically go out into the galaxy and either basically conquer, reconquer, or to protect what needs protecting, conquering, or reconquering for humanity.
That's right, yeah.
So the Space Marines are created, and obviously at this point we're looking at the Ultramarines. Yeah. I guess that's the first. Is that the first?
So the first faction is actually the Dark Angels. There's a lot of crazy shit going on in the current narrative for Dark Angels, and I'm a big fan of it. So yeah, he needs to first of all, he needs to get rid of these Thunder Warriors. They've done their job, but he can't really leave them lying around. They're just far too unstable for this next stage. So he actually goes about assassinating each and every one he can find, setting traps, killing them all, using these new legions of Space Marines, this refined Thunder Warrior.
To go around and hunt the other Thunder Warriors.
And they're not particularly more powerful. I think your average Thunder Warrior is a bit more powerful than your average Space Marine, but they have these like strategic understanding. They have like nobility. They have.
Okay, so this is where I think I'm going to pull you onto a tangent.
Yep.
So you say that. Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
You say that they've got more technological understanding and more kind of insight and more tactical thinking and stuff.
Yeah.
Why did the Emperor want them to stop being tools, and why did he want them to be like actual?
Because if you want to go about reclaiming the galaxy, you can't send a unstable brute force foot soldier to bring different colonies into the fold. You need to make, like
one that can think.
Yeah, one that can think, one that can make decisions for itself. First, what they call appearances. What the fuck are they? First appearances.
In regards to what? Like, as in getting to a planet?
No,
first contact, or like...
Yeah, you want to make a good impression, basically. So
you mean so when you re-find another colony of humans? Right, yeah. So you want to send down a big guy in power armor to be like, scrawny human, we're now humanity?
Yeah,
or is it
you don't want to scare these colonies off into thinking, fuck me, what the fuck is this? Why is he holding a gun at me? You want people to go down with reason, but are able to, if it comes to it, initiate conflict and
win. The conflict.
Yeah. So yeah, he starts doing this, and
how does, obviously, like, without the technology that we lost in the Age of Strife,
he's basically able to regain, or he's able to keep hold of some understanding of weaponry, and he does have artifacts from this golden age of humanity,
which could be weapons or parts of STCs.
Yeah, ships, whatever. He also has some. He has been able to, over millennia, retain alien technology as well, which I'm sure he utilised at some point or another, using these new legions of Space Marines. And as this is like humanity's first steps to retaking the solar system and the sort of like more immediate systems, they're faced with these fucking evil shit that has been ripe for the best part of 1,000 years, preying on these like planets of lost human colonies. So they need to go out and utilize pretty nasty technology in order to defeat pretty nasty enemies.
But they also need to be reasonable.
Yeah, and if they come into contact with peaceful or humanity that wants to join them, they're able to take them into the fold, train them, show them what the Imperium is all about.
So at this point,
and this is where,
what is the Imperium about?
So at this point, this is the stage after the Unification Wars. We now have a period of history called the Great Crusade, which is humanity is now reaching out into the stars, reclaiming its lost colonies.
And this is the Emperor with his Space Marines sending them out. So how does one man... So obviously he must create... There's thousands of worlds, millions of worlds, and there are...
Good idea, that's fucking sick, right?
Oh, it's so gory. Yeah. It's juicy. There are millions of worlds, millions of humans, billions, trillions of humans that have gone out and have been lost.
Yeah.
And you now need to send soldiers, these genetically enhanced, capable soldiers, into the far reaches of space.
Yeah.
He's obviously only... We've talked about him being ever present, but like he's still only one person. He had to use soldiers to get it. So
I know where you get that.
Yeah. So how does he control and get those armies, that entire aspect of these Space Marines going everywhere to, one, get the humans to toe the line? How do they follow certain rules?
Yeah. And
who leads them?
So, before I get into what I think you're getting into, I'll just briefly go over Maz at this timeline. So, the Emperor has retaken Earth. He's got a bit of technology, but he needs more. He needs to build ships. He needs to build more weapons. Maz goes through a very different history during the Age of Strife. They're able to retain a lot of their technological understanding. to the point where Martian society is now a cult that worships technology, basically.
And these were humans that moved to Mars from Terra, from Earth, and then they kept their technology things, and now they worshipped that technology.
So they're basically these. They worship technology as a sort of religion, basically. Where was I getting at?
We were going to talk about who leads.
They worship something called the machine god. And they believe, when they come into contact with the Emperor, they believe that the Emperor, through certain interactions, they believe he is an avatar of the machine god, which I believe they call him the Omnisire. He is...
Yes, that's the thing I think I read.
He is the prophet of this machine god. So you basically got the Imperium of Man forging an alliance with Mars, which is known at this point the Mechanicum. So you have the Imperium and the Mechanicum. And it's basically the only religious sect that he will tolerate, because he needs their
technology.
He needs it all. He needs their resources. So,
but yet they worship him as the prophet of the god.
Yeah.
And he's like, but religion's not real. Yeah. Just so you're aware of that. I'm not a god.
Pretty much.
Now I'm wearing... And I think the funniest thing is he's always depicted like this really resplendent gold armour with a halo behind him. And
That's right.
He has all of the magic power that nobody else has ever had, or ever will have.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not a god.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
he goes to Mars.
He goes to Mars. He gets them on board. They're okay, cool. Yeah, we'll hang out. So I believe.
Hey, buddy, what's going on over here? United Technology.
The Primarchs, right?
I am going to lead towards the Primarchs, yes, because I guess in terms of like the larger aspect of 40k, how does one man who's not a god control millions of space marines going out to billions of worlds to try and bring humans back together?
So he undertakes this project called the Primarch Project. And the Primarch Project is basically he creates these 20 sons, I guess. And they are not only post-human like Space Marines, but they are...
Part him,
yeah. They are several steps above your average, well, probably more than that. They're basically, if he's a god, they're your demigods. They are insane OP. They're just these individuals with these crazy abilities. And we're not just talking in terms of like martial prowess, we're talking understanding of the warp. Not all of them, each has their own strengths and weaknesses.
But as a basic, what are the Primarchs really?
So he, and this is a whole other story which we'll get to.
We'll get to that.
Utilising certain aspects of his understanding of the warp and sorcery and genetic understanding or genetic technologies, he's able to create these 20 super beings known as Primarchs, which he refers to as his sons. These Primarchs are scattered throughout the galaxy by chaos, which is another story. However, he still has these templates of which he created the Primarchs.
So before we go too far ahead...
Yeah.
So he creates the Primarchs to control the armies.
Yeah.
But he only creates 20 of them.
These are his generals. So he's got basically the genetic templates of these generals to create even more armies of Space Marines.
And why is their genetic template so important? Is it because part of them... I guess what I'm getting at is the bit that... I wanted to explain sort of like is it the genome where like each one's got like their own legion and that sort of makes a difference because they've got like their own Primarch's DNA passed down to them or something.
So each Primarch has their own traits and abilities passed down to these legions. You've got, in some cases, you've got so like 1,000 Suns, you've got the warp, their level of warp understanding. I think they're born, they have like a third invisible eye or something like that, and they're able to like the navigators see into the warp, utilize its powers. They have a higher understanding of the warp than any other legion. And then you have the Space Wolves, which have, it's believed, in part animal DNA. They're basically space Vikings, but they act like wolves. They're just these OP super soldiers that when it's needed they will basically turn into superhuman animal soldiers that tear limbs apart.
So did he create the Primarchs before he created the Space Marines?
I believe so, yeah.
So he creates these 20 sons, and they all have their own gifts that he's given them, kind of like, I guess, disciples, but with different... Yeah, it's a D&D party, and everyone's got their own job.
Yeah.
And so these 20 children of his, he gives one, better warp capability, another one, psychic ability, another one's, got this animalistic traits to them and stuff like that. And then he says... Now I'm going to create legions for you, these armies for you to control and go out and get all humanity back together. And I'm going to take part of you and your abilities, and I'm going to give it to those Space Marines.
Yeah, and these Space Marines they did start as human, and they started to be recruited from a very early age. And they're surgically implanted with extra organs. I think every Space Marine has a third lung, a second heart, different organic nodes that are able to grant them certain abilities. But yeah, he uses these templates to produce his legions of Space Marines. As we said, it's another story. These Primarchs are scattered throughout the galaxy.
Why?
Chaos, basically.
So, he sends them out to go and...
he doesn't send the Primarchs out. The Primarchs are basically lost from his possession.
Okay, so we have to get to that then.
Yeah.
So he sends the Space Marines out, but they don't go with the Primarchs.
No, so the Space Marines are... I think the first batch of Space Marines come from the first Primarch, which is Lionel Johnson. He's basically the Primarch of the Dark Angels. So they are the first Space Marines. And there are things called like the first foundings, the second foundings. So yeah, all these Space Marines start honing in their skills. They go out, they reconquer these colonies, and they're getting more efficient in terms of armies and able to deal with these ludicrous enemies. Not just aliens, but these extra-dimensional beings, things like that. And yeah, eventually he reaches a point where he's expanded out into the galaxy so far that he starts hearing of these super beings that sound a lot like his Primarchs that he's created. And in a nutshell, he's able to regain contact with these Primarchs, and then he gets these Primarchs to lead his armies as generals.
So how did he lose his Primarchs?
So it's
when were they created then? And like how did that go about? 'Cause surely like you create 20 demigods.
Yeah. I believe
which are not gods.
No. I believe he's creating the Primarchs around about the time of the Unification Wars. So whilst the Thunder Soldier's going out doing their thing, he's busy creating the Primarchs.
In his little Himalayan lab.
I think that's about the time. Fuck me, what was next?
He sends all the Space Marines out, but then if they didn't go with the Space Marines to control the legions, how are they lost? Because obviously I know what's coming.
Yeah.
But like, we'll get to that.
So the Chaos gods, being as tricky as they are, they don't like this. They see, and this is I'm not entirely up to scratch on my knowledge about this particular moment, but the Chaos gods, they basically see what the Emperor is doing through some means, and they don't like this. They see this as a real threat to their existence. So the Primarchs being part warp stuff, because he used sorcery.
Yeah.
I think he basically ends up stealing power from these Chaos gods, which is a whole other story. And they don't like this, and they see the Primarchs as a threat. So they don't destroy them, because I don't think they're able to, because they are protected in some fashion, I guess. But these Chaos gods are able to scatter these Primarchs throughout the galaxy.
They just open up warp portals and go, right, see you later.
Yeah, and each Primarch goes to a different lost colony and basically picks up the traits of that civilization and is a reflection of whatever society they are found in.
Okay, so
If that makes sense.
The Emperor borrows power from the Chaos gods then, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though he wants to deny all religion, but the gods are real.
Yeah. I mean...
He creates these demigods.
Yeah.
He creates these special troopers. He sends them out into the galaxy. Then, as they go out into the galaxy and the Chaos gods go, you know what?
Yeah.
Not cool. We
pretty much.
don't want you to have this kind of power, because actually we could lose our power now.
Yeah.
What happens then?
So I'll just take one step back and say, I'm mentioning the word God, and I'm talking. That's my easiest way to explain it. our understanding of what a god is in terms of 40k, we have no other word for them, so god will have to do. But humanity is mocked by other races for using words like god and demon, and other races are like, the word demon and god doesn't even begin to describe what you're dealing with. This isn't a god in your understanding, this is something else, but for the most part we've only got god to go off of. So I'll call them that, if anybody's wondering, like, oh, I thought he was against gods. So once these Primarchs go missing, he's able to regain contact with them. And one after the other, I think the first one he finds is Horus. He brings them back into the fold, and he reunites them with their legions. So these Primarchs are able to lead their legions as effectively as they can to regain the galaxy. And this fuck me, what was it called? The Great Crusade. This is going really well. Like, he is doing a great job at reuniting humanity across these colonies. And then eventually, long story short, some of these Primarchs go against his wishes. And that's when you get things like rivalries and jealousy and competition over the course of a few centuries. I won't get into it just yet, but there's a story about one of the Primarchs, Lorgar, in which he basically tries to bring a planet back into the fold by teaching people that the Emperor is a god when he isn't. And the Emperor doesn't like this. He punishes him, chastises him, basically, and that forms into other things going wrong.
Well, I think, because I know that story from you and from listening to some of the Luton videos and stuff, and this is basically, is this the one where Lorgar, is it?
Yeah.
Basically says, okay, so the Emperor is this god, and if we all follow him, he'll come and he'll save us, and humanity will survive.
And if
it's
you
the only
don't
way to
believe
get
him
them on
as a god,
side.
you're going to get slaughtered.
Yeah, and then the Emperor turns up and goes, right, I'm not a god.
Yeah.
And
why the fuck are you doing this?
Why are you telling them I'm a god? And to prove that, I'm going to destroy the planet in one hit.
Yeah.
And basically wipes out the planet like a god would.
He razes this planet to the ground just to punish Lorgar.
And that's how anti-religious he is at this point.
Yeah.
One of his own sons, one of these special
because he's
20
looking
beings.
he's looking at the records and he's thinking, well, this Primarch is doing really well with his armies. That Primarch is doing really well. Why the fuck is Lorgar so slow? What's taking him so long? Why has he only conquered like half a dozen systems in the span of, I guess, 20, 30 years? So he goes there and he sees what's happening. And yeah, he's really not happy. He just razes this planet to the ground in front of Lorgar.
Yeah, I think that's like, his wrath and his might is like, you will follow me, or there will be severe consequences.
Yeah.
And it's not just severe in the sense that like, you get a slap on the wrist or anything. Like, he will destroy your entire planet because one person said something.
Yeah.
And I found that, back to that grim dark of the future. It's like, whoa, like, we are talking extreme prejudice here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So some of them obviously start doing things that they're not really supposed to do.
Yeah.
And these are like meant to be like the beacons of the Emperor, I guess. Like his 20 disciples, his 20 demigods.
Yeah.
And then I guess we start moving towards the heresy, really.
Yeah, I guess it's the next stage.
As this sort of happens, and I guess Lorgar's kind of punished, and everyone's like, hang on a minute. So are you a god or are you not a god? Because you're acting like a god, but you're saying that you're not a god.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know, lead us into what happens with how Chaos ends up with. So for those of you who, like me, just see the minis and just go, I want to paint that, and that's cool. And you see things like the Thousand Suns, and they're a Chaos army of Space Marines. How does this come about? How come there are Space Marines on two different sides of the table?
So, Lorgar and several other characters, such as Erebus, you don't need to know that so much now, but basically Lorgar goes off, tail between his legs, searching for another meaning as to what to do with himself now that his planet has been completely razed to the ground. He is beside himself. He basically goes off on a big
As you would.
I guess he isolates himself from the rest of this
Puts himself
crusade.
into exile.
Yeah, pretty much. He just doesn't know what to do. He then discovers knowledge of these chaos gods, and that's where this all starts to go south in terms of the Great Crusade. So
it's Lorgar that finds them.
Yeah, Lorgar, not specifically Lorgar, but there is characters within his sort of circle, I guess, that bring them to his attention, and he understands that these are gods, well, to his understanding, and he now sees what they're all about, what power they can grant you, and then he goes, well, if I can't worship this person as a god, then I'm going to worship these as gods, because look at them, you know.
And these are the gods of chaos.
These are the gods of chaos.
So these manifestations of all the evil thoughts and words
and
actions that have come about over the course of the entirety of time.
Yeah, basically. So this is where you start getting things going tits up for this Great Crusade. So Horus, the 16th Primarch, first to be found, he is sent to deal with this advanced, in terms of Age of Strife, this advanced, technologically advanced civilization, human civilization known as the Interrex. The Interrex are a spacefaring civilization with different alien races tied in with that. Fuck me, where was I going with this?
Horus.
That's right. So the Interrex have these weapons that are created by these, I can't remember what they're called. I think they're called the Kinnebracht. I think that's their name.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll go with
I
that.
have no clue. I am learning from you.
They basically have these weapons that are strictly outlawed in this Interrex society now, that are basically sorcerous weapons. So they utilize the powers of the warp to kill their enemies, basically. They had this understanding of the warp that now is strictly outlawed throughout Interrex society. Horus and the Imperium come into contact with this civilization, and it's basically all a ploy. Somebody has, through one scenario or another, turned the Interrex against the Imperium of Man, because the Interrex thinks the Imperium of Man is chaos. The Imperium of Man thinks they're just another non-compliant civilization that they need to
Wipe out.
deal with. So I won't go into it.
And when we say deal with means kill them.
Yeah.
Because they're not
exterminate.
towing the line.
Yeah.
So just kill them. Because it's easier to do that than it is to try and turn them back to.
Basically. And we'll go into this again. This is a whole...
Yeah, this will be a whole thing. We're looking at a brief overview today.
Yeah. So this... where was I going with it? So this whole thing happens because certain factions surrounding Lorgar are responsible for this new conflict. They've put things in motion which creates like a misunderstanding between the Imperium and the Interrex. And that's when they start warring. Horus then sort of a little bit, I guess, he kind of regrets this whole affair, this whole conflict with the Interrex, because they're a very enriching, philosophically enriching, technologically advanced human civilization that was able to survive the worst effects of the Age of Strife. Any questions? No.
I think you're answering them all as we go.
I think I'm just talking mess, to be honest. I hope
No,
all
keep
of
going,
this
keep
is,
going.
like, easy.
I'm having a good time.
Great.
And that's all that matters, is that I have a good time.
That's good. So yeah, Horus comes away feeling a bit regretful about this, and he starts to sort of question the motives of the Imperium. Like, why do we need to conquer all these non-compliant civilizations when they're us, basically? So people start to question things, like the Emperor's motives and things like that, but not too severely. They're just a bit, oh, this is a bit shit, you know, we're going through a rough patch of the Great Crusade. Horus is then drawn to the attention of this planet in which he goes to, and he is wounded by one of these weapons that the Kinnebracht created, these warp utilizing weapons.
So basically a magic weapon.
Yeah. And this is a weapon that is powerful enough to like harm a Primarch. Primarchs are these demigods, superhuman physique, able to survive pretty much anything. And this weapon is flawed Horus. And he basically has, he goes into a coma, or like a sort of catatonic state where he's not able to wake up. And he has this vision. And in this vision, he comes to the chaos, he comes in contact with the chaos gods. And these Chaos Gods are basically saying, look, we can't defend ourselves. The Emperor doesn't know we're here. We need your help. And it's basically the Chaos Gods are manipulating Horus. They're feeding him lies. They're not giving him the whole truth. They give him a vision of the 41st millennium in which only a handful of Primarchs are celebrated. And this is the grim darkness of the 41st millennium we're in now. And he sees this vision. He says, fuck this. I don't know what's going on with this Emperor. I don't want this to come true. So he then turns against the Emperor.
And he embraces chaos.
He embraces, not knowingly, he embraces chaos. And then you have this, considering how well the Great Crusade is going, he's able to bring other Primarchs on board, specifically Lorgar. Magnus, man.
Yeah, we'll get to.
Yeah.
So Magnus is one of my favourite Primarchs, and his story is so tragic, and I adore it from like what I've seen and heard. But obviously you've read the books and you know more about it, so it's more heartbreaking to you. And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
However, so from my understanding and from you've told me and from what I've delved into, Horus then begins turning some of the other Primarchs against the Emperor.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
this is where Loyalist and Chaos legions
Loyalist
start to...
and Heretic, I guess, is the...
Heretic
in the 41st narrative, they're called heretics, because the Emperor is worshipped as a god in the 41st millennium.
And we'll get to that.
Fuck, man. Yeah. So you have Loyalist factions, and now you've got... I guess traitor factions.
Yeah, traitors. Traitors or heretics.
Yeah.
As they kind of like turn against the Emperor. And this comes about because Horus has been manipulated and thinks that the Emperor is actually doing something wrong. He then goes on and turns certain legions.
Yeah.
And they, we'll get to the whole like battles of certain places and the massacres and stuff that you've told me about.
Yeah.
Because I also am aware that we've got 15 minutes left to sort of cover the rest of 40k.
Okay.
As an overview.
Well, I think I'm just about done covering the basics of the history.
Yeah, because now we're at like the current timeline, or coming up to it. So like factions are turning, and this culminates how?
So
what's like the peak of this bit of the story that leaves us where we are with the war game, that leaves us with loads of factions that we can play and fight.
So considering how successful this Great Crusade is, because of the effectiveness of the Space Marines and these baseline human auxiliary forces, they're able to just bring these colonies back into the fold. The Imperium is doing pretty good. As a new concept, it's doing really well.
It's now the powerhouse in the galaxy again.
Now that there is a new civil war between the traitors and the loyalists, this is a period that lasts... This conflict only lasts about 7 or 8 years, I think it is. But this is catastrophic.
To what everything the Emperor was trying to do.
Yeah, catastrophic in terms of destruction to what has already been reclaimed. The Emperor's vision is shattered. Fuck, man. Like, this is potentially Age of Strife number 2. This is bad. So this basically ends up with Horus, through various means, various conflicts, various narrative and stories, he's able to get to the point where he is taking on Terra.
Earth itself. The seat of the Imperium and where the Emperor quite literally is.
Yeah.
And we'll get to why the Emperor stays there and hasn't gone out in space. And we'll get onto the webways. And I think we'll talk about that and why getting to Terra was so important.
Yeah.
But Horus gets there.
Horus gets there.
And there are several people of note that are there.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that Horus gets to the Emperor.
Yeah. So and this is the final book in the Horus Heresy that is yet to come out, and this is what the next stage is in terms of the Horus Heresy. So we think, and it's widely believed, that the Horus faces the Emperor on a 1-to-1 basis. What's that?
You big ball of law. You are a big ball of law.
Yeah.
It's great.
I wish it was more linear, but...
It will be in time.
And,
this is the thing, like, you guys that are watching either here on Twitch or hopefully on YouTube in the future, this may seem like a mess now, and this is what I was like when I first heard all of this, but I was like, "Boo! What the fuck?"
Yeah. And I'm simplifying this as much as I can.
Yeah, and it needs to be like that for this, because I mean this is already overcomplicated, but actually as I get Alex to go forwards hopefully in this series and talk about this in a more linear approach, and we will look at very specific times and individuals, and it will become more apparent as to what all of this is, and then you can rewatch this episode and then be like, I get it.
Yeah.
But we're at the point now. Horus has turned legions. He's got to Terra. He's got to Earth. Go.
So yeah, we believe that he faces the Emperor on a 1-to-1 basis. The Emperor defeats Horus, and I believe Horus is wiped out from existence. He is killed. He's effectively been killed. He is no longer an immediate threat. However, he is able to mortally wound the Emperor, or at least damage him to the extent that he is pretty much incapacitated. And that's pretty much the main... Oh, fuck, man.
So, okay, I'm gonna pull a bit from that, because I think there's a bit that I thought was really important.
Yeah.
And that was... so Horus leads this campaign against the Emperor, gets to Earth, and then during their battle manages to almost beat the Emperor.
Yeah.
He strikes him in such a way with one of these magical swords that had done him over that basically the Emperor cannot heal from this wound.
That's right.
And the Emperor, being this, not a god, but is clearly a god, from what I understand, basically can't heal, and he's got all of this psychic energy which is currently protecting Earth from the forces of chaos who are also trying to destroy Earth.
Yeah.
And
it's also worth mentioning all these different Primarchs. They're warring against each other. Some were sent as Horus's War Master. Some were sent to the far fringes of the galaxy
to not be there.
They can't get back in time.
Yeah.
And things
but that's
like that. And,
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And I think that Horus manages to strike the Emperor to a point where the Emperor cannot heal. He will die.
Yeah.
But Horus is also destroyed, and I think the Emperor does something where he splits his solar pot so he can never be revived or anything like that through magic. But the Emperor is still protecting Earth from the forces of chaos, and he needs to carry on doing that, or else humanity really will collapse, and it'll go back to being worse than the Age of Strife. And this is where the Golden Throne comes in.
Yeah, so should we talk about the Webway?
Yes, okay.
We're going to have to.
I think let's try and keep the Webway brief, because I want to cover that in a future video with you telling me more about it, because there is a lot more to do with it.
How do we start here then? If we... so basically...
Yeah, what is the Webway?
So we need to talk about the Golden Throne. And the Golden Throne is basically the seat in which the Emperor sits on.
The throne on Earth.
The throne on Earth.
Where all of mankind is ruled from.
The Golden Throne is basically... it's a machine that is able to...
Amplify?
There are several theories as to what the Golden Throne is. I mean, it's used as a device to amplify the Emperor's psychic potency, so that starships are able to use his psychic energy as a beacon of light to traverse the warp.
They can always find home.
Yeah, basically. I gotta stop saying basically, man.
I say like a lot. And,
I'm sure I've said it plenty of times.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. He can be used as a beacon. It also shields Terra, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In certain ways.
So I think the Aegis shield is an ancient piece of human technology that is still active and is able to shelter Terra from the worst effects of this invasion that is initiated by Horus.
Haggling. It's like, okay, I need a recap from 403 to now.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a lot. But we're currently towards the end of essentially a very quick overview, and I say quick overview, 2-hour overview of what 40k is.
Yeah.
So the Emperor has been slain to the point where he cannot heal.
Yeah.
He then has to be, put into this machine called the Golden Throne.
Yeah.
That will carry on...
It will keep him alive, his essence alive, but he is basically trapped there now. He can't really move from this mortal wounding that he's... mortal wounding.
He's a corpse, basically.
He's a corpse Emperor now. We talked about him being a perpetual. He can't really heal himself. He can still exist in some form, a corpse form, but he can't really regain his full power whilst he's trapped on this throne, and he can't move from this throne. We'll discuss why.
So he can't be taken off the throne for fear of mankind's destruction, but needs to be removed from the throne to die.
Whilst all this Horus heresy is happening, you begin to have loyalist factions of humanity perceive the Emperor as a deity, and they think this is like, this is the test. He needs to find his true followers. So this is where the religion of the Emperor starts to
take hold.
But it doesn't take hold. Its very early stages is probably the sort of final stages of the Horus Heresy, where loyalist people begin to see the Emperor as a god. The Emperor has basically been on this golden throne for the best part of, over 10,000 years by the 41st millennium. He still exists as he does, as a corpse on this golden throne, alive but not alive, there but not there, protecting humanity with his psychic whispers and his amplification of his psychic potency. The Imperium, however, has changed drastically over the course of this 10,000 years, in which the Emperor is now a fully fledged god and is worshipped as such by humanity.
Because he can't stop it.
He can't stop it. He can't get up and say this is wrong. He's basically... His vision of... the vision of the Imperium that he had in mind is gone. The Imperium you have now is basically one of suspicion, humanity does not trust any other faction. War is constant. There's never been such thing as peace in 10,000 years. I'm trying to think of the word that you...
It's in perpetual war.
That's it.
Yeah, so xenophobic. Like, so every human is like, right, anything that's not human, we'll kill it, because that's what the Emperor was doing originally.
Yeah.
And then...
and it's worth... We talked about the Martian civilization. So the Martians believe that all technology has been invented, and now it's just a question of rediscovering this technology. So, as strange as it sounds, this Martian religion, this technological religion, does not stand for innovation and
they just need to
invention.
refine it.
It's just a question of rediscovery. So the Imperium is basically stagnated.
They haven't evolved, they haven't advanced, because the Emperor's not there to kind of like give the technological things that's in his mind. And although he can protect people psychically across the world, he can't talk and he can't do anything else, can't move. And we end up with this... where Space Marines had Space Marine armor, that hasn't advanced, that hasn't evolved, and then we've just been left becoming more and more religious, because as people then start worshipping the Emperor, that gives him power, but he doesn't want to be worshipped as a god,
We'll get to that.
but needs to, because that gives him power. Because that psychic energy, that magic, keeps him going and is able to protect man.
So like we discussed with negative thoughts and actions giving more power to these chaos gods, the same thing kind of works for the Emperor. So the more people worship the Emperor, the more he's able to remain something. He's able to maintain his presence within the warp, which is able to stave off the worst effects of these chaos deities.
Because if he wasn't there, Earth would be destroyed and just enslaved. And and we'll get onto the grimness of the chaos here on afterwards. But I think that is pretty much a very brief overview of what 40k is.
I'll finish by saying, at this point, 41st millennium, the Primarchs, as far as we're aware, are mostly either gone or dead. We have Robert Guilliman, who is the Primarch of... Guilliman, he's the Primarch of the Ultramarines. He has only really recently, in terms of the narrative, made a reappearance, and now we have a second Loyalist Primarch back, Lionel Johnson, who is the Primarch of the Dark Angels. Cool. And this is how the narrative is beginning to progress. So for the best part of, over 10,000 years, you've had this stagnant empire, galaxy-spanning empire of superstition and war and xenophobia.
Which has also turned to like hyper-religion.
Hyper-religion, yeah. And we're talking like witch hunts, beware the alien, beware the mutant, beware the heretic.
And Chaos uses that as well.
Yeah.
All those negative thoughts to like influence people and to get in there and then release elements of hell.
It's a hellscape.
Yeah.
It is a hellscape of an existence.
Yeah.
In the grim darkness of the far future.
And I think that is probably where we'll end the lore session today.
Cool.
So that is, I know for me, a lot to take in, and I know that for a lot of people it will be a lot to take in, but we're going to start breaking that timeline down over the next coming episodes, and we're going to just talk about, like, I think we'll cover the Emperor of Man and the Webways.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about the Webway next session, because that's a big part of why the Emperor is trapped where he is.
Yeah, and that's so we'll get to that, and I think that is definitely the tagline for this series. Is we'll get to that.
I think I only managed to paint about 5 minutes.
Yeah, so our shitty little paint show. We'll at least show you what we've managed to do paint-wise as we sit here and talk Warhammer.
Really, not much.
So let's go with this camera here. So obviously you've been painting up the Tyranids. So feel free to show off your Tyranids.
I didn't manage to dry brush all of my minis, so I wanted to dry brush at least everything with the white dry brush to begin with. I then wanted to give it the red wash, but I've only really managed to do that with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minis.
Yeah, but when you get talking on one of these, it's kind of thing. But we've got loads of shows to do, and like there is so much 40k. Let's bring that up a little bit. Let's see if we can get that on there. So what's this one called?
So that's the Tyranid Broodlord. Eventually, so I've got 2 more stages to go on that.
Let's go that way.
So I'm going to give that 1 more white dry brush, just on the top where all the carapace is, the sort of fingers and the skull and the back. And I'm going to give that a brown skeleton wash.
That's awesome.
So that's going to look, I don't know if you can see that, that will end up looking like that.
So it's almost like all of that, it's almost like, I know it's Carnimals from Nemesis, where it's like the flesh has like been pushed through, the bones pushed through the flesh, and it's like, yeah, I like that. That's pretty awesome. You're saying that that's like black primer, white, and then a contrast paint.
Yeah.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think I'm certainly going to be carrying on doing my combat patrol as we progress through the series, and then when I run out, I'll buy some more.
I'll probably leave these here, to be honest.
Yeah,
come back next week.
But I thought that was the plan anyway. But so I assume that you're going to carry on with the Tyranids throughout this show.
Yeah.
As for me, obviously, like I've been doing the
get out of the fucking way.
I've been doing the fire card, and they're not anywhere near finished. I've still got a lot to do and a lot of highlighting and edge working to do. And but I really like that kind of like that Gundam-esque. Yeah, that Barrowhoff blue works really well for edge lining, and I need to really practice that edge lining, because I think that's something I see a lot of 40k painters do, is like really perfect edges and stuff. And yeah, there's a lot more on tale than I thought.
We got some comments there. What's that?
Yeah, so Hagley's said he needed a recap, and then was like saying well done, he really enjoyed it, which was awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for coming along. I think what we'll do is we'll close the stream down and stop the recording, and then we'll come back into Twitch and we'll just have a quick thank you and whatnot and say chat. But yeah, so we're going to stop.
Nerd.
Yeah, we're going to stop the chat there, and we'll come back in a second once we hit stop recording. But thanks for tuning in.
Awesome.
And if you're on YouTube, we'll put any links and stuff below to things like Luton and to
Adeptus Ridiculous. Is the one. There's various others I can't remember the names of.
Yeah, more in-depth lore things, because I mean at the moment it's just a case of you trying to teach me.
Yeah.
What this is before, because I think we're both going to learn for 10th edition how to actually play. So, yeah. Until next time, and we'll see you around. And if you're on Twitch, we'll see you in a minute.
Awesome.
Until then,
thanks everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.